Ethan Cole thought his battles were with spreadsheets, deadlines, and office politics. But a chance meeting with a stranger at the boardwalk showed Ethan the true tests lay in the quiet moments, where the toughest battles are fought in the heart. Ethan Cole's life was a predictable rotation of subway rides, spreadsheets, and stiff dress shoes. He managed a small team at a mid-tier tech firm, where his days were filled with back-to-back meetings and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. His evenings, when he had the energy, were spent scrolling through streaming services, his mind too tired to do more than absorb the flicker of scenes and soundtracks. One gray Monday, Ethan stepped out for a walk at lunch, his head buzzing from a passive-aggressive email from his boss. He wandered down to the waterfront, where the air tasted faintly of salt and rust, the distant sound of seagulls mingling with the clatter of passing trucks. Near the pier, he noticed an old man sitting on a bench, feeding bits of bread to a cluster of pigeons. The man's jacket was worn, his shoes scuffed, but his eyes were bright, scanning the waves like an old sailor. Ethan paused, his phone buzzing in his pocket, but he ignored it, his gaze drawn to the man's steady, unhurried movements. "You look like a man fighting a battle he doesn't understand," the old man said without looking up, his voice gravelly but clear. Ethan managed a polite, if confused, smile. "Excuse me?" The old man tossed another crumb, the pigeons fluttering in a gray blur. "I see it in your shoulders, the way you check your phone every few seconds, the tightness in your jaw. You've got a storm in you, but you don't even know where it started." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat. The old man turned, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You're not the first to feel this way, and you won't be the last. But if you want to find some measure of peace, you'll have to face the 3 trials." "3 trials?" Ethan chuckled, glancing at his phone as another message buzzed through. "I'm just trying to survive another day at the office." The old man smiled, his teeth surprisingly white against his weathered skin. "That's the first trial," he said, tossing the last of his bread into the air. The pigeons scattered, their wings beating the air like a sudden rush of wind. Ethan frowned, the old man's words sticking to his mind like sea salt on skin, as he made his way back to the office. That afternoon, his boss stopped by his cubicle, leaning over the partition like a vulture settling on a branch. "Cole," he said, his voice dripping with the false warmth of corporate familiarity. "I need that report by end of day. And let's try to be more precise this time, yeah? Last week's numbers were all over the place." Ethan felt the heat rise in his chest, the sharp words already forming on his tongue. He imagined himself snapping back, calling out his boss's constant micromanagement, his double standards, his complete lack of empathy. But then he remembered the old man's words. First trial. He took a slow breath, letting the sharpness dissolve, and simply nodded. "I'll have it for you." His boss blinked, perhaps surprised by the lack of pushback, then grunted and moved on, his tie flapping like a clipped wing. The second trial came that evening, when Ethan met a few co-workers for drinks. The bar was noisy, the conversations louder, everyone eager to vent about their shared miseries. Ethan felt himself getting pulled into the swirl of complaints, the petty grievances, the competitive one-upmanship of who had the worst boss, the tightest deadlines. But as he sipped his beer, he let his mind drift, tuning out the noise, focusing instead on the clink of glasses, the soft thrum of background music, the occasional genuine laugh. He realized then how much of his day was spent absorbing the anger and anxiety of others, letting it sink into his bones. He set his glass down, the foam settling as his mind cleared. The third trial found him the next morning, as he caught his reflection in the glass door of his office building. He paused, taking in the lines etched around his eyes, the slight stoop in his shoulders, the frown lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He forced himself to look longer, past the tired expression and creased shirt collar, to the person he used to be, the fresh-faced college grad with ambition, curiosity, a stubborn hope for the future. Ethan straightened his tie, rolled his shoulders back, and stepped inside, the glass door swinging shut behind him. That weekend, Ethan found himself back at the waterfront. The old man was gone, the bench empty, save for a few stray feathers and the crumbs of a recent meal. Ethan sat down, the air cool against his skin, the sound of distant waves a steady pulse in his ears. He pulled out his phone, thought of checking his email, then slipped it back into his pocket. He took a deep breath, letting the salt air fill his lungs, and closed his eyes. The city sounds fading into the quiet rhythm of his own heartbeat. He thought of the 3 trials he had faced, the urge to lash out when challenged, the temptation to absorb the bitterness of others, and the difficult task of seeing himself clearly, without judgment or regret. He had faced them without armor, without a sword, but with a quiet resolve that felt as solid as the worn stone beneath his feet. Ethan stood, his mind clear, his heart quiet. He walked away from the bench, his steps light, his thoughts unburdened. The pigeons scattered at his approach, their wings beating the air like the pulse of a new beginning.